Alright, welcome back. Today I have a very exciting game with just brutal fighting the whole way through. It's kind of neat to see. It's from the first Korean Women's League, which I know that the female Korean pros have been playing regular games, but this is apparently a new regular league. There's a lot of games popping up this year on some of the sites that have a lot of professional records from this league. And also the Japanese teams are doing this internet training league where they're playing a lot of online games with each other to try and improve their general level of play, which is pretty neat as well. But this game is very interesting because Rui Naiwei is basically, if we created a category for female Go Saints, she would be the first and only. She's by far, she's just one of the strongest players, period. She actually beat both, back in 2000, she beat Yi Cheng-ho and Cho Hye-hoon, who are both really top flight, Korean professionals, and particularly at that time, Yi Cheng-ho was very much on top of his game, and Rui Naiwei actually maintained a positive record against Yi Cheng-ho for a long time because she just has this really hard fighting style where she presses and presses and presses until something gives way. And, she's not so much into a relaxed game of, I'll take this big point, you take that big point. She just kind of gets in there and makes it a knife fight right away. So, because of this, Black has a very interesting strategy, which is like, okay, I know this is going to be just nothing but fighting. I'm just going to go high and thick from the very beginning. And you can see that, this is not a standard opening by any stretch of the imagination, but Black is just saying, listen, I'm going to be high and thick. It's like bracing yourself for the oncoming storm in this case, because your opponent's going to be attacking. And Black hopes to turn the tables a little bit. So here, White comes into the corner, and Black plays for just the most thickness possible. And this is interesting. This looks like a really ugly shape. And I mean, the empty triangle is ugly, don't get me wrong. But in this particular formation, this is the move, because this prevents the cut right here. We can see immediately that this net is working, so this white stone has nowhere to go. Obviously, this just dies. So, and this is why, and a lot of times in this position, we would think, oh, maybe make this table shape right here, which is usually better shape. But in this case, what will happen is now this cut is working. So the prettier shape move leaves a cut, whereas the so-called ugly empty triangle in this position prevents the cut. So shape is just a guideline, and if the empty triangle is the move that works in the position, it's the proper shape move, regardless. So, you have to read, you can't just rely on, memorizing, oh, the empty triangle's bad, but the table shape is good. In this case, this would be a huge blunder, creating a lot of thinness in the Black influence. So, obviously, being a professional, Black goes with the proper move, and, White draws back, and here Black turns, and this is just really thick, blocking on this side. White's, can still, jump out or push down here, but there's not a lot of scope for activity, and this is not likely to be a Black territorial area, because, we're not planning on using thickness to make territory, especially at the beginning of the game. If it turns out in the middle game that you are making a lot of territory with it, that's fine, but you shouldn't plan right now saying, oh, well, I should, look at blocking here, because eventually I'll be turning this into territory now. So now, White comes over here, which is really big, because, with this Black wall over here and all the thickness, it would really hurt to do something passive. And now we know we're going to come under really severe attack wherever we come in here. So White, kind of preemptively does this. And this kind of encourages, Black to, as in the game, just play on the 3-3, take the corner. White will extend to make a base, really simple. And then Black throws in this approach. Normally here, if there weren't any Black stones, Black would just extend, make a position on the side. But with this backup over here, Black is going to approach. White responds, and then black jumps up, and we can see all of a sudden black is sketching out a really large area here. And it's by no means territory. I mean, there's plenty of points that white can still invade, you know, do something like this, even. There's lots of possibilities. So, it's not territory, but this group up here is too weak to do anything right away, more or less, is kind of the issue. So white jumps out to keep this group from, being sealed in and potentially killed. Black just continues to apply pressure. This is, just kind of, these stones are definitely under pretty severe attack at this point. And this is where, it seems like black is kind of getting the game to go their way. Because, like we just saw in my last video, having two weak groups close to each other is a recipe for disaster in a lot of cases. And white is going to rely on her fighting strength to make this work in one way or another. But, it's only move 26, and white already has created two weak groups. And it just seems to me that if we're in that close to the beginning of the game, and you've already got two weak groups on the board, something has gone a little awry in your strategy. Black, cuts this stone off, makes these just three heavy stones floating in the board, which is kind of terrible. These three stones are not accomplishing very much. I mean, kind of just compare them to, let's just, these three stones versus, these three stones. Like, black is getting a lot more out of her stones in this position. But this three-stone wall with this one stone right here gives white a way to move these stones out. But first, white has to jump here lest this stone gets sealed in. And this is just, it's hard to deal with two weak groups like this, because you're having to go back and forth between them, whereas black is going to make one move that attacks both. So this is just the very stereotypical logic of why having two weak groups is not good. And this is the technique I was mentioning. Basically here, white can perform this counter Hane, and the logic here is that if black does this to cut through, white will come like this, black captures, and white will come here. And pretty much black has to connect here, and white will make this tiger's mouth. And you can see white comes out with this nice flowing shape, and black just gets this clump of stones down here. And the reason is that at this point, the reason black has to connect here, black, could theoretically, if black had a ton of huge co-threats or something, could play something like this to kick off this co. But basically, when white captures these two stones like this shape basically is instantly alive and thick. I know it doesn't literally have two eyes right now, but notice that, just something like this, white is still getting two eyes. So this shape is basically alive, and it's very, very thick, and it's right in black's position. And having this group go from weak to thick in an instant is not acceptable. This would kind of be a collapse for black, even though these stones are going to struggle now. With this group so strong, white can just fight to the max over what is going to happen with these two stones. And if you can go all out and you've got a thick group right there, it's going to be really hard for black to handle this. So this is just not playable here. So in any event, black's not going to do this. Black does this to kind of make a base and rob white of any sliding maneuvers against these two stones. Because notice that, if white got the chance to slide here, these two black stones are looking pretty weak too, so it's more of an even fight now. But black maintains the advantage by securing more or less a base. White has to come out, black jumps out, and again you can see the stone is attacking both groups. It's pretty slick. White's gonna do this to move out, and notice here this is a little better than connecting, because if black does take this one stone, we can just make this bamboo joint, no big deal. Black took one stone, it's not anything to worry about, but as opposed to connecting here, now we just have the one stone to jump out from, whereas with this we have the two stone wall to jump out from, which is a little more secure. And white needs all the security she can get at this point, so here we see that two stone wall being useful. Like if white had filled here instinctively because of the Atari, then this would be a more tenuous link. Hane's, and this is a cool technique, white counter Ataris here, and then this is this might look like a crazy move, but black also counter Ataris. So we have these 3 white stones all in Atari, and white gets out of it by capturing the 1 stone here, and then black is going all out here to try and seal white in. You can see, like, even though black's got all these cutting points, black is trying to seal this group in and keep it from getting out to the rest of the board. And white comes back, black extends, white leans over here, just kind of, now, before we get into fighting this ko, white kind of wants to see what aji is available with this stone and this cut. There's a little bit of trickiness going on, and white's going to try and use that to good effect. So we can see here, white's leaning this way, getting a few more liberties, creating a few weaknesses in black's shape. And here, white starts the ko. Black captures first, but white has created these ko threats. This is an Atari against these 4 stones, so even though black can immediately get out of it, this would kind of make this ko irrelevant because white would just live over here and capture a bunch of the territory from black. So black has to respond, white captures. Black goes here, and white decides this is not big enough, and just gets the group out. Because even though black will cut, white can still live in the corner here, kind of submissively, because white's only getting maybe 4 or 5 points in gote. So not only did black get to follow through on the ko threat, but black got sente out of it as well to come back here, and this is to definitely deny the connection of this group to this group. Without this move, there's a little bit of, cutting and trickiness and things that might be working, but now this really clamps down on the aji, and with these 3 stones, which, if white does cut through here, black will just, sacrifice them or something, but they kind of slow white down a little bit. So white's going to have to, deal with this group here, so kind of presses on top, black jumps out, white attaches here, black descends, and now we can see white's kind of, trying to counterattack and seal this group in while rescuing her own stones, which is definitely a good strategy. You don't want to just be running. If you can be running and sealing your opponent in, that would obviously be preferable. The problem is that doing this left a big weakness at the 3-3 point, which black activates. And white, in order to keep the hope of this connection alive, can't even respond directly to the invasion, so white has to push up here. And then white comes here, but this doesn't really end things. Black can still descend here, connect to the outside, and black has basically ruined the corner. Unless white gets another move to come back and stop this, the corner can be, taken by black at some point. So here, white's using the weaknesses in here to kind of build the outside position a little bit, get a little bit of shape for her own stones. And, continues trying to come out. Black comes over here. I think now that this black group is secure enough to manage this, this is probably good timing to kind of disrupt the lower side. But unfortunately, after this 1 response, there's no time to make a base. Black has to come out. And, the hope here is to, so, again, black is having to use these moves to make sure that there's eye shape. And this is, this is kind of, this type of move is what I mean when this game is just brutal fighting the whole way through. It's like we might think of extending or doing something, but this kind of jump, it's, kind of tricky to spot, but this works in a lot of cases, or at least, because even after, like, this exchange, white does something else, now there's, like, these cuts, that might be working, or, even something like, you could even sacrifice these 2 stones. There's a lot of aji, in this position, and in this pressing move against the relatively thick white shape gives black some interesting options. And black's strategy here is not to save this stone. Like, this stone is probably going to die, but it's on a really inconvenient spot for white. And until white deals with it, black's going to get use out of it. The real goal of this cut at h6 and then this weird pressing jump here is actually to create enough aji on the bottom to save the stone at A. And when we look at these stones, to me, it's immediately obvious that the stone at A is the most important one. Like, just looking at these 3 stones, or even, let's include this one. Out of these 4 stones, the stone at A is by far the most important because it's the stone that's cutting off this huge group at E. Okay? Like, you know, if we, like this, the stone at A is what's keeping the group at E from being connected, from having 2 eyes. You know, if we try to rescue the stone at B, let's see, it's white's move, let's just flip the colors. If we try to rescue this stone and white comes back and captures here, well, now this group is out into the center, it's got 1 definite eye. Yeah, we're probably going to be able to, you know, get most of the bottom here. You know, now white can come back and take the corner territory. But this little group on the side, compared to potentially capturing this whole group up here, is not anywhere near as good. So white's going to use these 2 stones down here to create aji to move out with the stone at h8. And we'll see that over the next few moves. White has to come back to, you know, push these stones down. And this immediate ladder isn't working. It goes to this black stone, but you can see how this stone now is creating a shortage of liberties for these 2 stones right here, which is making, you know, white have to spend all these moves down here to make sure that these are captured, you know, get enough liberties for herself, her own groups. And now black peeps here, which is again important because if white turns to do this, well, now we've captured this whole corner area, and white just got a few stones on the outside. So white has to save this. And now black comes out. And we can see that with these 4 stones and these 2 stones, shortening the liberties, that, you know, white can't just capture these 2 stones. No, don't close. And again, now these stones are down to only 2 liberties because of these stones that we were sacrificing down here. So white has to, you know, come back and capture this instead of playing a Hane, you know. If we can easily see that if the, you know, group at, you know, A wasn't there, white could Hane at B, which would be much more effective, you know, or just jump out at C and try and save the group. But in the actual game, white has to Hane down here to capture these 4 stones. So it's just a cool technique that black is using here to generate aji to move out with the important cutting stones, you know, because these are the stones that are cutting this group off. So it's important to be able to identify in like a cross-cut situation which stone is the more valuable one. And that, you know, just depends on the whole board position, and you'll get better at that the more you play. And here black is coming back and saying, okay, yeah, this group is pretty much dead now. You're not, you know, you're not getting anything over here. Now, on the other hand, we can see white's building a pretty large area herself along the lower side. But, you know, more or less capturing this group is pretty big. And here, white's just kind of, the one thing that white does get out of this is several very large co-threats, you know, starting kind of at A to threaten to make 2 eyes in here. So white has some compensation, and if a co breaks out, which one does, spoiler alert, white will have a lot of big co-threats. But for right now, white just takes the territory, and even though black has captured this big group, black is not that much ahead. So, you know, it's just kind of interesting, you know. And here white counter attacks, because black could obviously capture these 4 white stones now, but white would be able to link up, which would ruin black's, you know, big capture. And then white even extends over here, so we can see white's getting probably a lot of territory over here. Here black comes back to destroy the corner. Now these stones are linked up. So, or you might be possible for white to separate, but then black could jump to here and live in the corner. So, kind of makes me eye. Okay, yeah, see, so here white blocks to get at least a little bit of, save as much of the territory as possible, and then black has to link up securely. And here we see, white's prepping this situation for making the maximally effective co-threats. So, and then comes back over here. So, black destroyed the corner over here, but man, this is really big for white too. I mean, this is obviously really big for black, but the game is not, that far out of hand for anybody. So, and here we see white managing to, save quite a bit of this territory in here. Black does get a little bit of reducing in, which is always good. Comes back. And then this is neat too. A lot of times in the, if this were the opening and there weren't very many stones around, we could see that the move, this is the more standard move, making this kind of third line extension. But at the end of the game, we're basically an end game now, and a lot of times in the end game, it's better to slide to the second line to better protect the territory, because if we do the normal move on the third line without taking into account, all these stones in the center, because if the center was empty, we would not want the stone on the second line. We'd want it on the third line where it has more relationship to the open board. But now, this is kind of a null area. Nobody's making territory in here, but we are making territory along the edge. So it's better to do the second line slide to protect the territory so that black can't, jump in and do nasty things to our side territory. And that's just a little technique if you, coming out of the middle game fighting and you're getting close to the end of the game, consider a slide on the second line instead of the third, if it's better for the territory that you're actually getting in the game. So, just something to think about. Just kind of some pushing and sealing off territory. This is pretty small, but the issue is that after this push, again, this white group does not definitively have two eyes 100%. So white starts this coat over here to, get the eye shape, and here immediately ignores the first co-threat. It's better to Atari and have black connect and then ignore and come back. But this is basically escalating the co. Now, when white captures here, or, Atari's here, there's more eye potential for the group, essentially. Black retakes. White uses a co-threat against the lower left. White retakes. Black cuts. And again, white ignores. So this is the second co-threat that white has ignored to radically escalate this co. Because now when we capture this black stone, notice how weak, after, oh wait, sorry, black does something else. After white captures this stone, this group of A all of a sudden only has one eye. So even though white ignored two co-threats to do this sort of double approach move style co here, it actually has a lot of whole board meaning. And remember how I mentioned that white has some really big co-threats threatening to make two eyes over here? This is a neat strategy by white to try and get back into the game. So black again takes the co, and now white activates, all these co-threats that white has to rescue this group over here. And black is, this threatens the corner group, but white has a lot of co-threats, so white is unconcerned. White will just, resolve these moves. And notice that there's actually a lot of weird aji in here, because this black group still only has these two liberties, so a move at A is an Atari, and, maybe there's some weird trickiness with, cutting off these two stones in the corner, so that when white comes here, black actually has to fall all the way back and capture right here, instead of doing something direct, like pushing in or limiting the eye shape directly. And it just, it goes to show you how delicate this whole situation is in here. And like I said, this whole game has just been fighting, co-fighting, It's kind of a brutal game. Black plays here, and this threat is to, separate this stone that we just played at A, that we were hoping to defend the side territory with. And white says, not big enough, I'm taking here. And notice that this move also, in addition to threatening to take the stone, this move is directly reinforcing this group that now only has one definite eye. So it's a good all-purpose move. Like, it was black kind of saying, I'm not going to be able to win this ko, but let me make a threat that not only protects my own group, but threatens to cut off your stone here at B. So, it's a neat maneuver. First, black follows up with this ko threat that got ignored over here. And white immediately turns to say, hey, you don't have two eyes with this group. You show me where your eyes are. Show me where your eyes are. And a little counter-attacking. This is probably just a time Suji to get a little bit more thinking time. And yeah, so black ends up, capturing the one stone, but black's only going to get like 3 points of territory, 4 points of territory with this group, which is a little sad. We were thinking we would have some of this edge as well. And mostly just quiet endgame right now. Unfortunately, black is definitely ahead on the board, and there's no way at this point for white to, counter-attack or start another ko-fight or anything, so they're just kind of hacking over these last few little moves. And again, actually, back at this sequence, when white comes here, this is threatening. If white then hanes here, this is not an eye in here, because if, black plays here, white plays here, this is false. And so this eliminates the possibility of an eye in here, which makes black have to come back and do this. So just still applying pressure, but unfortunately, black's about 4 points. Well, white's actually a couple points ahead of him on the board, but with Komi, black's about 4 points ahead at this point. And just a little poking here and there, and we can see that, oh, here's this little, like, 1.5 point ko, because, if black gets to fill here, then this is a false eye, and if white gets to fill here, this is a real eye, so it's worth just a little bit more than playing a 1 point gote move. And they're gonna struggle over it, although black doesn't actually need to do this. Black is ahead by enough, but a professional's not gonna give in if they can. So here white does finally win it, but black fills here, preventing the other ko, and just a few little last... Yep, there we go. That's the end of the game, and black is ahead by 4.5 points with the Komi, beating Rui Naiwei, who is also, Rui is getting older. I don't remember exactly how old she is, but, she's not in her prime anymore. And she still plays, international tournaments, and you'll see her, playing high-level games against a variety of pros, but she's, one of the strongest players, of the last 50 years, just bar none, and the only woman to ever win a national title in any of Korea, China, or Japan, and that was, like I said, back in 2000. I think it was the Guksu title, which is like a big, it's like, one of the major national tournaments in Korea. So the fact that she was able to beat all comers and take a national title is pretty neat. And that's it for this time, and thank you for watching.